Are we ready? You still letting people in?
I think we're ready.
Okay, sounds good. All right, so I'm gonna just put my notes up here. Okay. First of all, welcome to everybody and happy 2021. I saw 2021 written as like part of a date, like randomly today, and it just looked wrong. It just looked really weird. Like, right, we're in 2021. So we have a very special program tonight, as you're all aware. I'm really excited about it. I thought what I do is I start with a quote about music from the Talmud, or I'll paraphrase a quote from the Talmud about music, and then I'll introduce our guests. So, as everybody knows, music is very, very important in Judaism, and I'm not going to go into all that, but in it's a very layered thing. And Renan provided me with this beautiful quote about the Talmud giving an account of David, King David, and imagining him singing from before his birth all the way until his death. Like his songs represented his very life, and this idea that we can, like that music will accompanies us all the way, like from the womb all the way until the grave. The quote is, while King David resided in his mother's womb, he broke into song. Once he emerged into the open air and he gazed at the stars and the constellations, he broke into song. When he suckled from his mother's breast and gazed at them, he broke into song. He looked upon his day of death and broke into song. And it's just this beautiful imagining of how the music just accompanied him from start to finish. And I thought that was very beautiful, and a good way to kind of to open our program. Before I introduce our guests, I really feel like we need to acknowledge the elephant in the room, which is, how exactly does Dan pronounce his last name? Because I can't introduce you guys without really knowing. And I did a little background research, and I found an interview, a Houston Symphony interview, where you actually spoke about it. And essentially what you said was, however you want to do it is fine, But I will ask you, how do you pronounce your last name, Strba?
Yeah, and that's what most of our friends say. Here comes STRBA, no vowel till the end. So yeah.
No, it's pronounced Sturba. That's how we pronounce it.
Turba, okay. And it comes from, what's the background?
It's Czech.
Okay, very nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's a lake Sterba, and there's also, it means the space between your teeth. Sterba. If you have any
Thanks
space
for
between your
bringing
front
that
teeth. Oh, sorry.
There's some metaphor there that I'm not going to go with. I don't know what, but okay. So I'm very, very happy to welcome our guests, Marcia Sterling and Dan Sturba, who are the founding members of the Best Little Klezmer Band in Texas, which many of us are very familiar with, especially at Brush Shalom. They've been part of our Brush Shalom family for many years now, and we're really fortunate to have them. So thank you for all of the joy that you've brought to us over the years.
Thrilled to be part of the mishpucha, and thank you for inviting us tonight. This is really exciting for us. We really appreciate it.
Great.
Like King David, we both came out of the womb singing for sure.
Doesn't surprise me. I would. Oh, so you cut out. I didn't hear you.
Oh, just making music from day one. I mean, my mother used to sing lullabies to me in Yiddish, so it's from day one.
Nice.
And it just, we're skipping way ahead, but klezmer, as you may or may not know, the word klezmer from kli zemer, vessel of song, which of course means just the instrument. This is the vessel of the song, which came later to mean the musicians themselves. But klezmer music was not vocal music, really. Klezmer music was instrumental music, hence nigunim. So when we talk about music, and here it is, it doesn't have anything to do with language. It's the universal language of the soul, really, right? We don't have to have any words. It just is the expression of the soul. So, and okay, so where to begin? At the beginning, for Dan and I moved here in
92.
92. We'd been living in Chicago for all those years. Dan, I think Dan, as most of you may know, is a member of the Houston Symphony. He plays viola in the symphony. You probably know him as the piano player in our band. And let me go to a different view here.
I don't think I've ever seen him without a hat. I'm just putting it out
Oh
there.
my God.
Because when you're playing klezmer, you got your hat on.
You thought he had an entire head of hair under there, didn't you? Ah, we fooled you. So we we were living in Chicago happily. I have to say, I hope this doesn't offend anyone. We were living in sin. We were living together for I think about 6 years before we actually got married. But during those years, Dan was playing with Chicago Symphony, and I was playing with the Maxwell Street Klezmer Band. And then
Wait, before you go on, how did you get to the Maxwell Street Klezmer Band?
Because one of my friends who was a trombone player, I played in I think the Chicago Chamber Orchestra with her or some. I was a freelancer, so there were a lot of gigs in Chicago, and her name was Audrey Morrison, and we went after a concert, a Chicago Chamber concert on probably a Sunday afternoon. We went back to her place. She said, "You've got to hear this," and she put on a recording of the Maxwell Street Klezmer Band singing by Mir Bistushane, and I said, "That's klezmer. I never heard that term before." And she said, "Sure is." And I said, "My gosh, I grew up on that song because every Shabbos, my parents, my especially not my father's side so much. They were the Yekas, but my mother's side, they were all Yiddishkeit all the time. They spoke Yiddish at home. And of course, they didn't want us to know what they were saying, and that's why they spoke it. But nonetheless, my uncles and my cousins and all my friends, they would get around. My mom would be at the piano and they would do "By Mir Bis Duchesne" and they would break out into 3-part harmony because that's what they grew up with. That was their era, and so I, that was a song very near and dear to my heart. And here it is, klezmer music. Klezmer, really? Okay, it's klezmer. So one thing led to another, and the man who was playing violin in the Maxwell Street Klezmer Band, he was in lyric opera, and so he had huge conflicts, and he couldn't play a lot of dates. So I had an opportunity to audition, and ironically, because I didn't, even though I grew up hearing Yiddish at home and all the Yiddishkeit, when I got out into the working world as a violinist, my first job was strolling at the Hyatt Regency downtown. So there was nothing. I wasn't doing anything with my Jewishness in that sense. I wasn't playing Jewish music. But one time in this band that I was in that had this great gig, 7 days a week, 7 nights a week at the Hyatt, we got cut back to 5 days a week. So on the weekends, we did private parties. And it just so happened did a Jewish wedding. And so the leader of the band calls me up and she says, the mother of the bride has a request and it's in Yiddish. So I thought of you. I don't know if you can sing it in Yiddish. And the song was Rozenkes mit Mandolin. I'm like, sure, I can sing that. So I sang it in my perfect Yiddish. And so when that happened, and then later, maybe 6 months later, I get a call to come and audition for the Maxwell Street Klezmer Band. She said, sing a song, and that's the one I sang. So it's like, okay, great. So I probably played a little violin. She could see, okay, so I got into the band. And that was that. When I left Chicago in 92, the band was doing 15 jobs a week, which means we had to split into two because we didn't have enough personnel to cover that many bases at the same time. And I mean, this was 15 jobs a week, and most of them were on the weekends, right? So I ended up leading one band, and Lori Lippitz, the founder of the band, led the other band. So anyway,
Can you give us a little taste of either, I can't pronounce them correctly, but either of the songs that you mentioned?
Oh, Rozenkes mit Mandeln is raisins and almonds.
Can you are you able, do you have your instrument nearby?
In a winkel cheder, siehst die Almone, was Sion allein. Ihr ben Jochidl, Hidl in sich cheder. Und singt zum Schlafen a Jidlein, lein. Lilu. Unter jedes Wiegele steht der Chlorweiß Ziegele. Das Ziegele ist geworden Amen. Das wird seinen Beruf. Rozenkes mit Mandeln. Schlaf Jedele, schlaf Jedele, schlaf Jedele, schlaf, They're always so sad, right?
That's great. Thank you. Renan says you're hired.
D minor.
Yeah, D minor.
Which is the saddest of all keys.
Did you guys ever see the movie This Is Spinal Tap? With yeah, so that was a funny joke. They always said D minor was the saddest. People, when you sing a song in D minor, people instantly weep. Right. There's something to that, but we just call it in klezmer music. We just say it's the people's key, you know, D minor.
So you left Chicago to come to Houston.
Oh, that was a great story. So, well, let me tell you how Dan and I met, because this is really funny. So I was dating Mark Perlish. He is a flute player, and I'd been with him a couple of years.
Did you only ever date musicians? That's okay. You don't have to answer. It's okay.
Chicago, yeah. When I was in Chicago, because I was born in New York City, but early on, my father was a controller for J.S. Lerner, and they moved their headquarters to Kansas City, Missouri, and so I grew up in Kansas City, and I went to I went to high school there, the Music and Arts High School, and then I went to the Conservatory of Music there. Okay, and then I moved to Chicago, and so after a few years, I got this fabulous steady job, and which is also a very funny story, because I got this job at the Hyatt, and it was very, very coveted position, 7 nights a week. I was raw, green as green, the green of Kazina, and I waltz into town, and I audition for this job, and I get it. And so I go down to the union because I had to transfer my union dues, and they said, "Oh, no. You can't you're on probation. You can't just waltz into town and take a 7-night-a-week steady downtown. That's not going to happen, because there are many, many people in line before you that would like to have that job and are qualified to have that job."
Yeah.
So my teacher, and really the reason I was in Chicago at all, because I was in an orchestra in Israel. I was in Tizmoret HaGalil, and I came back to Kansas City, and I didn't want to be there anymore. And I had my Sherry Berger, my best friend, had moved to Chicago, and she was a big voiceover talent, and she was the voice of Culligan, hey Culligan man, if you remember that commercial. Okay. So anyway, Sherry Berger moved to Chicago, and so I went up to stay with her, just check out what was Chicago. I was walking around. She went to do a voiceover, and we were downtown, and I'm walking down the street, and I say, was this gorgeous building on the Magnificent Mile, and it's Roosevelt University Chicago Musical College. Oh, I'm going to go in there and check that out. And I had my violin with me. So I go up to the 7th floor, and I hear the Tchaikovsky violin concerto. So uh Ba-yum, and I'm drawn to the music, and I door is closed, and I sit outside, and I'm just listening. And so the door opens, and this gigantic man, I don't even know, it's like Andre the Giant, he kind of looked like. And it was Adia Gertovice. He was a Romanian Jew, and which of course I knew nothing at that time. And he goes, who are you? I said, I'm Marcia Sterling. He goes, what are you doing here? I'm looking for a teacher. Okay, you found one. Come in. So so I, he takes me into his studio and play something. So I play something, and that was it. So I started, studying with him, and from him, I said, I don't have a job. I don't know what I'm going to do. All right. So the next lesson, he says, here, call this person, Georgia Francis. She has just gotten a contract to put an all-girl orchestra into the Hyatt Regency, and they're just opening up their 40,000 square foot enclosure. It was a big megillah. So I get this job, right? I audition for Georgia Francis, and okay, then I go to the union because I have to beg them to let me have this job, and they're not going to let me have the job. So I leave, and my teacher says, Miss Sterling, you are a show business type person. He says, you must go into the union president and you must cry. You must cry and make it convincing, that you have to have this job. And that's what I did. I went in there and you don't understand, I have to have this job, And finally, after a few minutes, he's like, all right already. Fine. Take the job. Keep your nose clean, kid. You do anything out of line, you're out, So that's how I got the job.
Wow.
And, anyway, oh, long story. I'm going to make it as short as I can because I can run on, as you can see.
That's so interesting.
So I'm playing the gig at the and I've got Mark Perlish as my boyfriend, and so he breaks up with me after a couple of years, and I'm devastated. In the meantime, wait, I have to back up. So I'm dating Mark Perlish, and he's a flute player, and he's the very go-getter guy, and he goes out and he gets this job for violin, flute, and cello. And we have a steady at this restaurant. And things go awry down at the Hyatt. I decided, after I'd already been there, I don't know how many, 7 or 8 years, and I decide I there's I just want to go, and I take this job with the Rome Festival Orchestra. The job is in Florida, and so I tell the leader, I'm going to go for a week. I've got this gig, and she goes, "Oh, you can't leave now. We've got our most important gig this weekend. You can't leave." And I said, Georgia, you say that about every gig. Every time I try to leave, you say it's the most important gig, but this time I'm going. Well, if you go, don't come back. Don't call me when you get back. Because, so that's what happened. I came back and she said, no, that's it. And so now I'm out of a job. And so at that point, that's when, how did that go? So I was out of a job, and I took a freelance job playing with the Chicago Chamber Orchestra, right? Oh, that's what it was. Oh, you'll love this. There was a new group was performing, a brand new orchestra. It's called the Chicago Philharmonia. Great. So I audition, I get in, and the day of the very first rehearsal, before that, I've got to figure out a way to make a living, right? Because now I quit the Hyatt job, and so I think, okay, hey, I can form my own flute, violin, and cello trio. What do I need Mark Perlish for? So we made a recording, and we had a photo session. Well, the day of the rehearsal, I just happened to be coming from this photo session, and I tell you what, I look like $1,000,000. Oi! I mean, unbelievable. I looked fantastic. So, what I found out was, um, Mark Perlish. Oh, that's what it was. I'm forgetting some crucial things. Mark Perlish broke up with me. That's what happened after 2 years. Okay, now I don't have the Hyatt, and now I don't have my job with Mark Perlish. So now that's when I said, okay, I'll form my own. But Mark Perlish left me for Catherine, who was also a violinist in the Georgia Francis Orchestra. So, the freelance world, and everybody knows everybody, and everybody's dating everybody, and musicians. In answer to your question, did I always date musicians? Yeah, pretty much. So, so I'm devastated that Mark has dumped me. I've never been dumped in my life. How could this happen, right? So I go to this rehearsal, all decked out, and I get there, and it's in total disarray because it's the very first rehearsal. And so I asked the personnel director, where do I sit? And he looks and he says, "Oh yeah, okay, you sit over there." Well, I was kind of late. I mean, it was just time, I had maybe 2 minutes to get my violin out and get going. So I sit down in my chair, I take out my violin, I look at the music because I want to try to warm up, and I'm looking at it, and it's in alto clef. It's not in treble clef, which violin is in treble clef. Viola, however, is in alto clef. And Dan here is sitting next to me. And he's got his hand, he's just watching me. He's just watching me. And I said, wait a minute. What's going on here? I'm in the wrong section. And he said, yeah, you play violin, right? It's like, yeah, you're in the wrong section. And he said, I'm Dan Sturba. And I thought, oh my God, this is a guy. Mark Perlish dumped me for Catherine, and Catherine dumped Dan for Mark. Yeah. I said, oh, we have a lot in common, but I have to go over there and sit in my regular chair. And so it was instantaneously, it was instant.
I love that. That's beautiful.
You're Dan Sturba. Oh my God, that's funny.
Perfect. Wait, so did you know about her?
Yeah, because she had been playing it at the Hyatt.
Oh,
so nice. Dumped me for her. She was gorgeous.
Can we take a quick music break? Oh, Dan, did you have something to say? Dan, do you get something to say?
Hey, I need to say no more. Okay, take it away. No, anyway, I tell you, we met that night. We met at that rehearsal, and at every subsequent rehearsal, Dan asked me out. Can you go out after the rehearsal? Can you go out after? I couldn't. Whenever I had something back. And then after the concert on Saturday night, we went out, and we have not been apart since. And that was 20 years ago.
Very nice. Can we take a quick music break? Do you guys have your instruments nearby? Maybe play us a little klezmer something?
Sure. Well, klezmer, it encompasses many, many genres. The real klezmer, it was just the instrumental music, and you've heard many times. It starts with the little the secundo, the second violin will play the rhythm, right? And then something like that.
That was so cool. So Dan, it sounds like Marcia. Oh, I lost him. It sounds like Marcia might have kind of pulled you along to klezmer. Is that because you were in the Chicago Symphony and here you're in the Houston Symphony? How did you kind of get roped into that?
I kind of have a diverse musical background. My mother was a piano teacher. She taught in the Chicago public schools for like 35 years or so, and she loved, and my father loved gypsy music, and so we did a lot of gypsy music. And I started piano at age 4, and then when I was about 10 or so, I took up the guitar, to play rock and roll. And I did that for a few years, and my mother was like, "Oh, why don't you try something else?" And that's how I ended up on the viola, and playing classical music. And so mostly my training has been classical, but I grew up in Chicago, and I was really in the freelance scene in Chicago, and that meant you played everything. You played classical music, you played pop tunes, you played, weddings, bar mitzvahs, everything. So I was very familiar with all types of music. And when I met Marcia, then I used to go hear her play all the time. They had the Maxwell Street Band had a steady gig at a restaurant 2 nights a week, Wednesday and Thursday. And I used to go there all the time and listen to him. And occasionally I would sit in, but mainly I was like a classical viola player. And when I got the job down here and we moved down here, it was basically pretty devastating for Marcia because she had everything there.
Right.
And she was all set up, and she gave it all up to come down because I had this job. And so, I'd come home from rehearsal and she'd just be listening to sad Yiddish songs and crying,
C minor.
in D minor, exactly. And finally, I said, why don't we start our own band here? And
guess who came up with the name? The best little klezmer band in Texas. That was Danny Boy here.
That's perfect.
Yeah. So from that point on, I was swept into the klezmer world. And
before I ask you more about klezmer, what does gypsy music sound like?
Oh my!
Let's play.
Here we go. Funny, you should ask. All right.
Thank you.
something like that.
That was mind blowing. Oh my gosh. Everybody, you heard it here first.
Gypsy music is mind blowing. When you hear the real gypsies play their music, which we happen to be so fortunate because we had real Roma friends in musician
and they were
friends.
musical family.
They were
Everybody
genius.
played.
You just can't believe what that was like.
Yeah.
In fact, every December 25th, we went to their house for years. And from all walks of life, they would come, whether they were a cab driver or they owned a business or whatever. They'd all sit around this giant table and everybody just take out their instruments and just play. I mean,
That's amazing.
It was in their cells.
That's beautiful. I mean, it was mind blowing. The music was amazing just now, but I have to say, to watch the two of you play together was also amazing. Like, it's so beautiful. It's just so beautiful.
My God, how lucky are we? Oh,
yeah, lucky.
No, it's good. It's great. It's great.
Awesome. I will tell you, full disclosure, Renone and I got married in March of 1998, and we had a klezmer band at our wedding in Jerusalem.
Was that in Skokie?
No, we were in Jerusalem. We were living in Israel at the time. So we found the Bernie Marenbach Orchestra. And do you know Bernie?
No, I can't say as I do, but that's cute.
So anyway, so we had him, and it was like all klezmer all the time, except a little Israeli dancing in the middle and a little regular dancing. But so Renone and I have loved klezmer for a long time. Tell us a little bit about klezmer and the Jewish people and why you think it's important to preserve klezmer.
Well, first of all, it's so universal, so that we can bring in. You don't have to be Jewish to like music, you know. I mean, we used to say you don't have to be Italian to like pizza. You know, it's universal. You can't stop your toe tapping or you want to move, and it's in your body. You know. Why is it important? Well, because it's it's all the more poignant because we almost lost it, and that's the real importance in today's world. And where it really came into popularity in this country for sure was when Fiddler on the Roof came out, and that
sparked a renaissance.
Yeah.
Mm.
So why is
found
it
the
important?
records, the old 78s.
Well, that's it.
Because there were a lot of klezmers that came to the U.S. Luckily, in the 20s, and it also mixed with jazz.
That's what happened because they brought their klezmer music and all the traditions of Eastern Europe, and they found a new home in New York, and they certainly found the recording industry found them through the Yiddish theater, and so their music became popular. And then after Fiddler came out in the 60s, well, then it was a household word, then all the klezmer band. There were, at that point by the 70s, there were over 400 klezmer bands blanketing North America.
Wow.
And it's when we still are doing our show, we put together two different shows. One is just a klezmer show to Life L'Chaim that we do in the schools through young audiences. Then we've gone a step further for the older ones in the middle school. We've put together a show that's a multimedia production, and it's There Once Was a Town, and it creates the beauty of the tradition of klezmer. So it takes you right in from the beginning, and then you see the screen comes down, and then we address the Holocaust,
wow.
what happened, and the renaissance of it in this country. And as Dan started to say, because what was going on in New York in the 20s and the 30s and 40s, jazz. So these wonderful musicians, started playing jazz too. So that's why most of the great clarinetists and klezmer bands, they also play saxophone. Their mother made them start on clarinet, but when they grew up, they were playing jazz on saxophone. but just personally to me, it just is the taste of home. I mean, it brings everything. It's quintessentially Jewish. Yiddish is quintessentially Jewish. I'm not sure what else to say. It just goes to the heart and the soul of what it means to be a Jew, to me anyway. So.
Right, beautiful. I want to be respectful of your time because we're already coming up on 40 minutes. So before we go, I was hoping two things. One is, would you play us a little jazz since you mentioned jazz just now? And afterwards, do you have a few minutes for question and answer? Do you have a few minutes for people to ask? Okay, so Marsha and Dan are going to play a little jazz for us now, and afterwards we'll open it up if anybody has questions.
Of course, if we're going to be playing jazz, Dan would be playing piano. But if he goes over to the piano, you won't hear him.
Oh.
What if I take this microphone over there? Well, so what by Mirbis Duchesne? Can you hear him?
We got it. It's quiet, but we can hear.
So let's see. Of all the guys I've known, and I've known some, until I first met you, I was lonesome. When you came in sight, my heart grew light. This old world seemed new to me. You're really swell, I have to admit you deserve expressions that really fit you. And so I've racked my brain hoping to explain all the things you mean to me. Here we go, jazz it up. By Mirbis Duchesne. Now, if I was going to play a solo. Viel schöner Mädlach oben schon Gewalt nehmen mich und von sie alle ausgeklieben. Hab ich nur dich, bei mir bist du schön, bei mir hast du kein. Bist einer, bei mir it means you're so grand. By Mirbis Duchesne means that you are grand. Oh yeah. Swing.
Oh yeah. That was fantastic. Fantastic. Okay, I'm gonna open it up now. Dan, thank you. I'm going to open it up now. If anybody has a question, you can either put it in the chat or you can just unmute yourself and ask Marcia and Dan.
Sure. This isn't really a question, but I just wanted to bring you back 5 years ago tonight. Your band played at my daughter's wedding, at the Videccan, and at the ceremony at the Corinthian. And
a beautiful wedding. I love that wedding.
Thank you. Rabbi Teller officiated, and now they are married 5 years and expecting number 2, their second child.
Marcia, it's Rona. I have a question. Back in Chicago, there was like a Jewish festival on the lakefront. It's the first time I heard Debbie Friedman. Did you play in that too?
Evanston Music Festival.
It was in Evanston, yeah.
Really funny. This is really funny. So the Maxwell Street played that festival every year, and the 1 year I remember, they got up and to introduce the band, and it's Maxwell Street. They just put ST for street. So she announces this, and ladies and gentlemen, let's have a warm welcome for the Maxwell St. Klezmer Band. The leader, Lori Lippitz, is like, oh yeah, okay, well, St. Klezmer, that's us.
That was a great festival. I think we were there about 3.5 years, but I know 1 year at least I went, because then when we moved here, I heard Debbie Friedman here, and I know I heard her there when she was still there.
Absolutely, that's right.
Nice. Any other questions? Nope. Quiet. Okay.
What about so klezmer is a mixture from lots of different parts of Eastern Europe, I assume. taking from various parts of the music around them? And
I'm going to answer that question. That's very funny. Who said that? Lena, hold on. Okay. It's klezmer has many, many influences. Originally in Europe, it was just, this instrumental music. And to tell you the truth, the klezmer musicians were, you see the fiddler on the roof. It wasn't, Isaac Stern played the music, but they were not skilled, trained musicians. But who were the gypsy people? And the gypsies came to these big weddings and really played, and the klezmers played, but then of course the big influence when they came to this country was jazz. So jazz and klezmer mixed together, and then Yiddish theater. That's when it became vocal music, because klezmer was only instrumental music. But then the Yiddish theater came along, and then we started singing our songs in Yiddish, and that all got mixed in together. So yeah, there's lots of influence. Lena, I have to answer this question. This is funny. Here's Lena's question. Inquiring minds want to know, is the other couple who broke up with you, Mark and Catherine, still together? Well, in fact, Lena, they got married, and they were married for about 8 years, and they didn't have any children, and they got a divorce. And
then she married another friend.
And then she married another close friend of ours,
who was a bass player.
So see, I'm telling you, too incestuous. That's a funny.
I noticed on your website that you, including the two of you, I think you've got about 10 musicians listed in the Best Little Klezmer Band. How did you go about acquiring them, hunting and gathering musicians in Houston?
I have to give a lot of credit to. Okay, here's another very interesting story, and I'll try to make this really brief. When I came here, when Dan and I came here. The very first time we came, I think, was in January, right?
Yeah.
We came down. He auditioned in September. We got married. This is the great. We got married August 8th. And in September, a month later, Dan auditioned for the Houston Symphony. Now, mind you, we'd been living together, having a glorious life for 7 years by that time. We get married, and 4 weeks later, Dan takes a job in the Houston Symphony. I'm like, for better, for worse, I never said for Houston. Is that part of the for worse? I mean, what? So that was just like shocking. What was the question? Anyway, Mark and Catherine.
How you found your musicians?
Oh, okay. So when I was in Israel, I played in Tizmorat HaGalil, the Galilee Symphony Orchestra. Does anybody know Dave Ziegler? You know who Dave Ziegler is?
Renan said yes.
Yeah, he plays cello. And his wife, Ruth Ziegler, is from Kansas City, Missouri. She's a violinist. I knew her at the conservatory. So David and I were friends in Israel. When I get to Israel, I meet David, and then I came back to Chicago. Then Dan gets the job in Houston. We come down to Houston, and not only is Ruth Ziegler in the orchestra, but Linda Goldstein is in the orchestra. She was in the orchestra in Israel. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's just such a small planet.
That's great.
So
how did you find the musicians?
At that point, Dave Ziegler knew there was another band. You remember the Gypsies, right? Does anybody remember the Gypsies? Okay. Well, there was a band, they were doing klezmer music. They called themselves the Gypsies. And Janice Rubin, Janice Rubin was the singer with the Gypsies.
Nice.
And she basically jumped ship. When I came, Susan Gantz, if you remember Susan Gantz, she helped me get started, but it was really Janice Rubin who introduced me to a lot of musicians. A lot of them were already playing klezmer music with the Gypsies. Because let's be real, there's a whole lot more Jewish musicians a lot more klezmer musicians in Chicago than there were. Right. So it evolved, but basically we got our core members who were already working with the Gypsies.
Beautiful, beautiful. All right, well, I think we will end here. If you guys would give us a musician's choice final performance of something that you want to play for us.
Oh, gee. Uh, um, um, let's do Abyssal Zoon, Abyssal Regen, Ruik Orten, Kopselegen, a Bigesnund, Dein Ken Men Glick Glick Sein. You should only be healthy. You should only be happy. You got your health. You got everything. Seid gesund.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. That was very beautiful. We really enjoyed getting to know you guys a little bit better. And it's so fun to get all the layers underneath the performance that we get to see. It's wonderful.
Vicki, I don't know if you know that when Kohalev was around, Marcia did our high holidays for many years. She was our cantor.
Nice.
And there's several people in the call tonight that, you know, are now Brit Shalom members that were Kohalev members. I was always both, but yeah, she had to learn a whole new thing.
You what? Yeah.
That's wonderful.
Really.
So I just have like 2 minutes of housekeeping things for everybody. As you know, this is our first 2021 CBS Women Insights. We're going to be doing them once a month. I had scheduled them for the third, pretty much every third Sunday of the month, and I found out that, and I checked a community calendar and Brit Shalom calendar, and it turns out there's a Chavurah that has a program on the third Sunday of every month. So I might send something around just to ask, you know, how many people it affects. For now, we're doing the third Sunday of the month and through June. And I'll keep you posted on who our next guests are going to be. So thank you everybody for coming tonight. It's so wonderful to see your faces, and thank you to my whole family. My brother, my sister, and my parents are here. So thank you. Good to see you all. If anybody wants to stay on for a couple minutes to schmooze, you are welcome to. I'll stay on also. But anybody who wants to drop off, thank you for coming.
Thank you. Great program.
Thank you.
Wonderful program. Very enjoyable.
Good. I'm glad you enjoyed.
Hey, Vicki.
That was great.
Yeah.
That's
Thank
Lynn.
you.
I think it would be really great to have these folks give a concert. We always seem to have them just as the klezmer band. And there's kind of always a lot of chaos going on and dancing, which is lovely and fun. But I think it would be a real pleasure just to have them give a concert. So
Yeah.
I just want to toss that out there for the idea book.
We will definitely take that into consideration. I want them to be my resident musicians in my house, actually. I have a couple. It is true.
You do.
Vicki, I don't know if she would even be open, but today I heard a program from Jewish Women's Theater Group in Los Angeles. And it was from Ruth Weisberg, who I'm very friendly with, the artist. Mm-hmm. And she was amazing about the depth that goes into her work. She did a Reform Haggadah. I don't know if she'd ever be interested in speaking, either for this or the morning program.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool.
Her work she has a lot of Judaic work, and it's very meaningful. It's a Jewish involving history. It's all figurative. She's it's just I wish I could paint like she does. I just like.
Very cool. Thank you, Rona.
But
good.
Zoom makes it you're able to see her. I mean, otherwise I might meet her once a year.
Those are the
good things about it.
The strange upsides of this crazy pandemic, is we've gotten closer with those further, even my family things, like Mother's Day was always, my siblings and my parents, and we would call to Father's Day, the same thing. This time we're like on Zoom and we're playing games. We're like, it's a whole thing. We're all there, that's been the fun part of a very, very, very difficult time. So, yeah. Okay, I think I'm going to sign off.
It was
Thank
a
you.
great program. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Joyce.
you.
See you. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Good to see
Okay, bye.
everybody.
Thank you,
I like your hair, Rona.
Thank you, Vicki.